BCCI Executive and Council members, BCCI Executive Director, Michelle Loban Clark, sponsors, NCB Capital Markets Barbados Limited, Ernst & Young, the Central Bank of Barbados. Welcome to this session. The first item on the agenda is the address by the featured speaker. Now, our featured speaker today is well known over the past 18 months, for he has been one of those in the forefront of articulating the economic restructuring program. But before we get to him, we are going to hear from Ms. Tricia Tannis, Mrs. Tricia Tannis, who is the president of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mrs. Tannis is a chartered accountant by profession. As you well know, she has been associated with what we know in Barbados as Courts Barbados Limited, but is better known in business circles as Unicomer, and has been leading the Barbados Chamber of Commerce for some months now. It is my distinct pleasure to have Mrs. Tricia Tannis deliver the welcoming address.
An extremely warm good afternoon to each and every one of you. And thank you to Dr. Greenwich for David Ellis, sorry. Promises to be a very exciting afternoon, obviously. For doing the honors and establishing the protocol. And having done so, I will just proceed straight into my remarks. Although I do want to especially thank the Honorable Attorney General Dale Marshall for his marketing activities on behalf of the Chamber in the last 24 hours gratis. Thank you, sir. But distinguished ladies and gentlemen all, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the first in the Business Luncheon series for 2020 for the Barbados Chamber of Commerce. We are indeed honored, as is our tradition, to allocate the first of our luncheons to the Prime Minister of the day. And we're honored that, at least this year, the Honorable Mia Motley was able to allocate us in our calendar and to give us of our time. And although she's not the featured speaker today, she has agreed to engage with the audience in an open and frank discussion. Our featured speaker, Dr. Kevin Greenwich, Senior Technical Advisor to the Government of Barbados, will engage us under the theme, Envisioning 2020, the Path Towards a New Decade. And this seeks to examine how the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program will help to transform the Barbados economy and move our country into the next decade. And this theme calls us to assess the lessons learned and how, as a private sector, we can help to chart a new path towards the economic prosperity for Barbados, recognizing that the private sector is a key driving force in the country's economic growth. Today we anticipate and indeed encourage frank, respectful, and robust discussion on the role of the private sector in facilitating growth and investment, as well as being honest about the barriers that could prevent economic buoyancy. We are, of course, encouraged, and we recognize the importance of the traditional growth sectors that contribute to the economy, notably tourism, which leads a tradable sector, and financial services, which leads a non-tradable sector. But we must see our role as germane to the introduction of innovation and the exploration of new sectors as well. As we all know from the various enterprises that we lead, it is always more difficult to achieve growth from mature markets and segments. Growth is always going to be obtained far more quickly from the newer, riskier, more nimble diversification and newer sectors. And this will help to neutralize the overdependence on the monocrop type approach. As custodians of business, we must therefore contribute to a healthy balance of tradition and innovation if we're to indeed take this country forward. We are, of course, encouraged by the trading opportunities and the establishment of areas of cooperation aimed at mutual economic development between Barbados and other countries, such as the cooperation agreement spearheaded by the Prime Minister, by the governments of both Kenya and Guyana. And we are therefore proud to announce that the Chamber, in collaboration with the Barbados Private Sector Association, has entered into a memorandum of understanding with KEPSA, which is the Kenyan version of the Private Sector Association, in December to encourage and explore trade opportunities and business-to-business alliances. And this agreement will explore cross-border opportunities and technical exchanges with our counterparts in Kenya. It is no secret that the private sector has experienced significant contraction over the past decade as the consequential impacts of the global economic crisis took its toll on the local economy. We are therefore cognizant of the austerity and the depth of the crisis and the commensurate Herculean task undertaken by the current government to stabilize the economy. As Dr. Greenidge will no doubt highlight, this has come at a significant cost locally, and certainly we as the private sector have contributed significantly to that effort in regards to debt restructuring. We've had significant write-downs of portfolios of government securities. Of course, the operating cost of our businesses has climbed as well as we contributed to the revenue generation measures. The private sector, is therefore encouraged by the macroeconomic gains, successive sovereign debt rating upgrades, and overall expectancy of growth in the economy from 2020 onwards. We acknowledge that private sector-led growth must explode on a scale and scope that is tangible. This growth, however, must be nurtured in its correct context if it is to be sustainable. There is much to be said about the ease or lack thereof of doing business in Barbados, and we are well aware that we rank in the lower percentiles both regionally and globally on the international competitive indices. We need to move therefore with urgency to address not only our global competitiveness, but local effectiveness if we are to realize the growth that we seek and which is indeed attainable. The issue of business facilitation remains a key area of focus for the Chamber. However, a narrow definition of business facilitation, which centers primarily around the operations of GIPO and similar agencies, is ill-advised. Certainly, the ease with which investors can register businesses and the financial services sector can register and update deeds and security documents is critical. However, there are several impediments that should equally command our attention. As I've mentioned in previous fora, the speed of project planning approvals, the flexibility or lack thereof of labor legislation, productivity in both the private and public sector are also to be considered. The digitization, certainly of public sector business processes, also needs to advance rapidly. And these factors may not necessarily appear in our international competitive indices, but are no less impeding to growth and development than those that are indeed listed. The absence of functioning regulation for emerging industries, such as fintech, an industry that has exploded globally, needs to be addressed as the financial services sector grapple to establish the credibility of these businesses. Renewable energy is another gold mine waiting for us to exploit, and certainly the 1 megawatt currently approved by the FSC needs to improve dramatically. Another aspect of the business facilitation infrastructure is the eradication of corruption. Recent events involving a high-profile public figure serve only to highlight the inescapable reality that the misguided actions of a few can redound to the collective shame and embarrassment of us all. Level playing fields, fair play, and transparent competition are critical to promote sustainable growth and development. It is within this context that the Chamber notes regretfully that the Integrity in Public Life 2018 nor the Prevention of Corruption 2019 legislation has been proclaimed. We continue to call for the urgent proclamation of the legislation in order to send the strongest possible message to the local and international community regarding the gravity with which we view the stain of corruption. The international community will no doubt be keenly observing the local response to this verdict, and swift implementation of this legislation will resonate positively in that regard. One final observation on this matter, though. Most, if not all, of the commentary around that highly publicized trial has been on the acceptance of the proceeds of corruption. As members of the private sector, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the role that the private sector played in that affair. We've all gone very quiet. Corruption is a coin with two sides. For every corruptee, there's a corruptor. I don't know if that's grammatically correct, but for hyperbole, we will create a word called corruptee and corruptor. Corruption must be eliminated on both sides if it's to be eradicated at all. Finally, the unprecedented brazen acts of aggravated crime in this country is a grave source of contemplation for the Chamber and requires an urgent and public response from the national security agencies and indeed all of us. Our macroeconomic gains can easily be eroded if due care is not taken to identify the root cause of this upsurge and the appropriate response mechanisms that are needed to uproot the scourge as our reputation as a safe and peaceful jurisdiction is now under threat by the reckless actions of a few. The Chamber pledges its support to all law enforcement agencies of the government and will assist in any effort to reverse this plight. Such was the case, for example, when it partnered with other private sector bodies in the Private Sector Association to contribute to the cost of the police outpost in Lakes Folly. But we must simultaneously address the issue at its core. I would also encourage a national dialogue on the return to societal and civic values where such systems and values are shaped, that is, in our homes, our schools, and in our churches. A few housekeeping notes before I wrap up. The current government has kept the Chamber extremely busy in 2019, and I'm sure that will continue into 2020. And we continue to engage, particularly with the Customs and Excise Department, on several issues. Of course, the most notable of that was the implementation of Assecuda World and the transition to the harmonized system of tariffs in 2017. We continue to engage our members, and we do solicit your support as the new Customs Act has now been drafted and proposed. And we do need your feedback when we come to you. We do covet your review. It does actually promise very significant changes, and we would like to offer the opportunity to you to participate in that review when called upon to do so. We will also be launching our new strategic plan this year in 2020, as we hope to engage our members in a more significant and public way. And we will obviously be supporting the government's effort with the Regathering Initiative with our mix and mingles, and we will be locating those events parallel to the Regathering calendar. 2020 will also mark the return of our annual flagship event, our awards ceremony and conference, and we hope to include special recognition and awards for businesses of excellence that are in the Barbadian diaspora as part of the regathering effort, and much, much more. At this time, I would like to, again, acknowledge our sponsors, NCB, Capital Markets Barbados, Ernst & Young, and the Central Bank of Barbados for their commitment and partnership in making this business luncheon a success, and indeed all of you for your attendance and your continued support of the Chamber. We sincerely wish you a very engaging and enlightening afternoon with us, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Now to the feature address. Dr. Kevin Greenwich was born here in Barbados. He worked for 17 years in our own central bank. In his last role there, he served as Director of the Research and Economic Analysis Department before moving on to the International Monetary Fund, where he served as Senior Economist. Dr. Greenwich holds first-class honors degree in economics from the UWI Cave Hill campus and a master's in economics from the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. He earned his PhD at the University of Nottingham, also in the UK. He's widely published, having written extensively on economics in over 200 publications, both regionally and internationally. And I therefore want you to help me welcome to the podium to deliver his feature address on today's topic, Envisioning 2020, the Path Towards a New Decade, Government Senior Technical Advisor, Dr. Kevin Greenwich.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm acknowledging all protocols have gone before, so allow me to get right into my presentation. I think a bit of correction is in order, though. I've been called a feature speaker, giving a feature address. Indeed, I'm just here to lay the wicket for who will really come after to deal with the hard balls. My job is quite easy at the moment. So that being said, I want you to envision Barbados as we embark on this process, as we're in transforming Barbados' economy. There's two missions. One was protecting the dollar and stabilizing the economy. And the next big mission is the transformation towards a country of world-class excellence in all fronts. And I'm going to kind of set the background for where we are in the first one, and lead that where I'm sure we engage in a lovely discussion about what we are doing, what we need to do to get to the second stage. All right? All right, so moving on. And again, even through life, if you try to, you have a vision where you want to go, it's always good to keep in mind where you come from, the context of where you're moving. So this is a way to measure success. How have we been doing so far? And that's the context of my presentation. So I like to entitle this Resuscitating and Transforming and Aiding the Economy. Sorry. All right, there we go. And some of you might have seen one or two of these slides when they do come up. All right, so, okay, they are. All right, so what has been the nature of the problem before? When we began our economic transformation program early in August, what were we looking at? What was the initial problem? We have encountered what we now call the lost decade. 10 years of zero economic growth, and you can see the numbers there. From 2008, following global financial crisis, to in 2017, 10 years of economic growth. And that hits hard. What does it really mean for the average person, for you? What does it mean? We hear 10 years of economic growth. Well, look at this picture on the side, on the left. The K, which is GDP we have to share, or wealth, however we want to call it, grew or doubled between the years 1993 and 2007. And most, for 12 of those years were growth. 2 absent, that's when we had 9/11, and another one I don't recall. But that came off the heels of an IMF program in 1992-93, where we sought to restore some structure in the economy. Then between 2008 and 2017, the cake literally stagnated. They did not grow. There was no yeast in the cake, as if I'm a baker. So what that means is that the amount to share remained the same. Now, if you were to do some simple math and look at population growth relative to the size of the cake, we call that economics per capita income, how well people are off. In those years, the per capita income of the average Barbadian dropped by 5%. At the same time, inflation went up 36%. So, put those two together, you will say the cost of living for the average person over that period literally deteriorated by almost 40%. That's what I mean in real terms. That is why we focus on getting growth, why we need growth. Without growth, you will be worse off. And that's what we face. Not only that, what has really caused that was coming out the financial crisis, the fiscal position and stance became inappropriate for what was being faced at the time. And we went from having deficits averaging 2% to deficits averaging 7%. Now, if I have my bank account and my income, my expenditure is consistently a deficit for 10 years, you can imagine what will be happening to my debts. Same thing for a country, is no different. So that skyrocketed to roughly 176%. And you can see this sharp rise in it. More deficits, they got to borrow, and it keep happening. And we've heard this story before, but it's always good to keep it in mind. Where the government of Barbados borrowed consistently first from the national arena, and then when that became difficult to borrow because of the cost, from the local banks, from the local banking sector, and when the banks became cautious and they decided we're going to close off the tap from the central bank, and we continue to borrow to. And this is the debt we face, 175.6%. In fact, in terms of indebtedness, we always do it relative to the income of a country to make comparison. When we did that, the 176 made us at that point in time probably the third highest indebted country in the world, following Greece and Japan. But Japan holds the largest reserves of U.S. reserves in the world, so they could pay the debt in a hurry. So it's not a good group to be in nonetheless. And that's what we had to deal with. And I won't go through it, but this is just to say that why debt? I mean, I wrote a paper that is published on the IMF website years ago to show debt, and my former colleague Delaware will disagree with me. Debt is a drag on growth. And I don't need a scientific mathematical calculation to tell you so. If you're going to pay 68 cents of every dollar serving your debt, that's 68 cents less to do roads, infrastructure, to do what, health, education. That's the cents that you don't have. That means you got, what, 32 cents? My math's correct? To do everything, pay wages, salary, buy goods and services, everything. You have to borrow. And in borrowing, it becomes more expensive. So they don't need, I did some what we call economics regression analysis and mathematical derivation to prove this. But this is common sense, right? But that's how we do it in economics. We write nice papers to say the obvious. So you can see why it's a drag on growth. And why the focus, as I show you later, had to be reduce that debt at all costs. And of course, if you're earning no money, and you're consistently borrowing, and you're a country like Barbados where everything, if I take an average of this room, everything you guys have on probably was imported. I'm not sure about you. He's a farm fella. It takes US dollars to do that. And if you're earning, and you keep borrowing from the central bank in Barbados dollars to buy things that you don't produce, that's what happened to your reserves. They go from almost $2 billion to just about $420, well, around $400 at the end of 2017. Enough to buy, I would tell people, 2 things of sardine and a pack of biscuits, and you're broke. So that's what I'm bleeding. And there's a big story here, no? There's a main point here. When you reserves, we have what we call a fixed exchange rate. Everybody know that, 2 to 1. The only way you can define that is have a pot of money, we call the reserves, at the central bank. So when persons come and say, want to buy a pair of shoes for $20 US, the central bank will say, okay, here's the 20 US, give me 40, 2 to 1. The day you can't do that, then persons go to the, what we call the economics parallel market, down Broad Street and other places and taxes. Say, give me, a fellow say, I give $250 for one. That fellow say, no, I give $275. That is when you can no longer define the peg. We have reached that stage where the peg was in precarious scenario. And that was tantamount to everything. In fact, I will show you later in a slide why we had to, by choice, announce a debt default. I will show you why that was clear and because of this story. All right, so that's it. I have another profession going on, son. You see Bobby's lying on the bed, huh? And what are the big issues? Debt. Got to learn to grow again. And that was the nature of the problem. So how have we done? It's 18 months into the program. How have we done? I need to do that to look forward. I must say, so the economic team came together, the Barbados economic team, and designed a program to deal with all these ailments that I point out. And that program was endorsed by the IMF and on the 1st of October. I was supported by what we call EFF, Giving You Technical Extended Funds Facility of 200%, 220% a quarter. It was necessary to have the IMF endorsement because if you have a history of behaving bad, nobody ain't going to believe that you're going to behave good the next time round. You need a bigger, more credible institution or something to come and say, well, what they're doing makes sense and they are committed to it. And that's why we have the IMF endorsing and reviewing our progress. And Mr. Burt is there, not named after the program, but so how have we fared so far? I can keep very quickly in the pictures, yeah? First one is the fiscal. You remember we had deficit averaging 7%, really causing us to have debt. So the first issue, the major problem is to have to fix the fiscal. And to give the funny picture of it, for the first time in 10 years, government ran at the end of 2018, fiscal year 18-19, a primary balance of 3.5%. So now it means you're not taking on any more debt. Anytime you run a surplus, you can actually pay down your debt. or do something like that, so we're not taking on that first time. And we know that the program, because I don't want to go into technicalities of it, our program is anchored on a debt trajectory that converges 60% by 2033. On the line, that is a primary surplus balance, we call it percentage GDP, that must get us there. We're committed to getting 6% for a few years, and then we will taper off accordingly. This year, so far for the year end of December, we are 4.8, 4.9% GDP, well on the way to that. Of course, that means a lot of sacrifices, a lot of fiscal inefficiencies, tightening up here and there, etc. We can go into that in discussion. But nonetheless, I say fiscal sustainability attained, meaning we have now put government finances in order, and and their commitment to keeping it that way. If we maintain on track, we will be sustainable on the fiscal, meaning we alleviating the pressures to borrow more. Very simple. What's the other? I should mention the fiscal adjustment. In terms of programs, the adjustment that Barbados has undertaken will be in the 90th percentile of adjustments in other countries. It means it's a large fiscal adjustment. And that is a signal that is reflective of the depth of the problem that was encountered and the commitment to put it on track. It's no small feat. If you look at the IMF staff report published for the second review, in the back you will see some analysis. It shows you the adjustment relative to other countries. I think we're in 92 percentile. So it's not an easy feat. But we have done it in such a way, it's been done in such a way that a lot of it comes over the last 2-year period since the program started, the end of March. We anticipate a 7 percentage point improvement in fiscal. 5 percentage point of that is coming from the expenditure side, where we had the state-owned enterprises were totally inefficient, totally unsustainable financially. Many of that is coming from efficiencies on the expenditure side. 2 percentage point is only coming from the revenues. So when sometimes hear people say tax, only 2%. And that is even done in such a way to ease the burden. For one, we're shifting from direct to indirect taxes, more so. And research has shown that the indirect taxes, where you do with the VAT, and also our taxes are more conducive for growth than direct taxation. That's the way we're going. And we also shift from spread the burden from domestic to international, from resident to non-resident. Truly, you see the tax on hotel sectors to some degree and international, balancing out. So even though it's a large adjustment, it's done in such a way to ease the burden as it impact persons. And these charts look clever, but I borrowed them from the IMF staff report. I had to get Bert to let me say that. All right, what have we done on the debt? You saw the debt was going up, that we're going to space, right? And you see the peak there. Now, our debt is about, at the end of the year, from 176 to 19%, and we still come from the final point. That is an amazing accomplishment in a very short time, I must tell you. And I have the IMF thing here, so I can't tell lies. In terms of speeds of adjustment, that is fast, trust me. And that is because we have had to do 2 debt restructurings. And on the external debt restructuring and domestic debt restructuring. And those alone brought us about 30 percentage points down on our debt. And then the external brought us down a bit more. Those has helped us to, I said, debt sustainability has been attained. Now, this is a lot of information. I can talk for the whole afternoon, that's the truth. Because so much here that was novel and new. Just to point out a few. Even the way we restructure our debt, we did it in such a novel approach to ensure that in the future we won't come this way again. Much of our new instrument include a clause for natural disaster, which in the event, and this is a real reality for us in the region, even though some people might argue about climate change. In the event of natural disaster, and it probably increases that, you can postpone your debt service payments for about 2 years, where you get time to catch yourself. And that is a novelty as we respect to that. And the rest of the path, you see reconversion in 2033. We are mindful that includes growing the economy. These are the things that get done that way. We don't have to focus on the growth. It includes the government running surpluses, which means the government, we have to manage the affairs and financing the government. Yeah? And it includes managing the debt we take on, that the debt is productive debt. If we have to take on any, that gives us the returns to pay it down. You see? So the whole management skills, the whole transforming way we do business. And I just put this to show the green part with the SOE there, which was triangling. When we look at the data, many times you see the SOE we've either helped that, we eliminate the SOE debt, take on SOE arrears. I shall have mentioned earlier that on the previous slide, not in fixing government finances, on the program, government is committed to being current on all its obligations. Cannot run arrears under the program. Indeed, the arrears figure went from about central government arrears, 1.2 billion. Now the arrears number, if I think I should have paused there. Yeah, the arrears number went from 1.2 billion when we started 18 months ago. Now the arrears is at 167 million. That's central government, and that is arrears not this year, because since the program you can't run arrears. That arrears from 2010 onward on PIT and VAT and etc. We get the data later if you're interested in it. And the SOE arrears, which was another 8 or so percentage point, is down to if I remember, is it there? 65 million. I must tell you, even on the program, when we first put together the program, we had expected at this point in time that we will move from 1.2 to about 1.9, about 900 million. But recognizing that the adjustment on the fiscal, because it's so hard, can be hurt growth, it was a policy decision to pump liquidity in the system to offset that effect. So you're paying back persons money that they can then go out and stimulate, get the economy going. That offsetting meant that the adverse effect, anytime you have a fiscal adjustment, you're going to have an adverse effect. Whoever tell you different, maybe they're working for a different team. You have an adverse effect, but pumping money in the system, paying back your debt, etc., paying down liquidity helps you to get the growth going. All right, so where was I? Back here. So we took off, we burn off the SOEs, and a part of this is also reforming and restructuring SOEs that we have done. And that process is still ongoing. Some of that could come on in discussion, but you remember we started this process with an online survey for Barbadians of what is desirable, what is optional, what is highly. Come out that survey, we identified the institutions that needed serious work and easing of debt and restructuring and reform, because it's all connected. Let me not waffle. In the fiscal, when you look at it, usually transfers to any state-owned enterprise and any fiscal accounts are not the largest component, usually small. Barbados are an unusual case where transfers were perhaps the largest component in the fiscal. Huge, and it was a mess. So to reduce that on the program, because that is partly what you got, because you can make your fiscal look good by transferring things to SOEs, which happened. So now we're looking at a complete picture. To remove that meant that the SOEs had to improve the way they're doing business, because you're getting less money, and you cannot run a race. So we had to go in, use the work done in Transport Board, work has been done at Barbados Water Authority, even recently buses at SSA, all the work, and you see what's happening at the port, etc. These are all part of the reforms to ensure that you're not just reducing the burden that SOEs have, but making them efficient, and as the Prime Minister said, fit for purpose, financially fit, so that they can now do the business more effectively, more efficiently, without running arrears. Reserves. You see where we had, I just put the international kind of accepted standard, even though that has risen recently, of 12 weeks, but with the increased climate change, all the activity, 12 weeks is certainly not enough anymore, especially living in a region like us. But you see around, tell me if I point it will work, yeah, around here. You see where we were, this was the 5 weeks of import cover. We have since rebuilt it to about 18.7 weeks of reserve cover. Of course, that a large component that is the debt, financial support from our donor partners, including the CDBs and others. But when we abstract from that, the reserve path is upward, trending upwards, which means there's positive activity going on. And this is a slide I was going to mention why. Well, first of all, going forward, the program is designed in such a way that you see the reserves at the top. We have enough space between reserves and debt service for all the things we need to do. But if you were to focus at this point in here, in where the two met, This was in roughly May of 2018. That blue bar is the debt service required at that time, external debt. And you could see that was the reserves. So we had enough money even to pay those that was coming due in June. So you got two choices. You wait till the coolie man come and you don't pay, or you I tell you home, or you call your coolie man and say, brother, I got a halt for now. Which we chose. You can opt to do a voluntary default, or the market can default on you, which is not so good. And then we choose the latter. But you can see why. There was no time to play. Using my Bayesian language. There's no time to bother about. We had to halt. So anytime we heard that we had choices and we could think and take time and choose, that's a whole long talk. It don't work so. But you can see now that going forward, we've left that space between those payments. These were big ones that were coming. Some person may ask, and why not just focus on domestic restructuring? Because they had some 2-3 bullet payments coming on the external, which means, and you don't want to have to restructure again. Deal all one time. And the blue now is a new path for the debt service coming. And you can see there's sufficient space between that and the reserve path that will allow us to be comfortable once we stick to the program. These are the things we had to deal with and where we are right now. Credit ratings, you've also heard we've also had some recent upgrades, but let me put that in context. This is our credit rating path, how we look. You know, you could say, a person argued I have not been worked hard enough. You could see, around 2012. Now, above the seawater, there is really what we call investment grade. They just make animated so you can see. And below the seawater, you're drawing in jump. Right? So we didn't jump wrong when that is. Around 2010, around 29. I can't see the numbers from there. But you can see that we slid into jump in very early in 2009. And we've been declining further and further and further and further into jump for a while now. What that literally means is that when government, and there's a lot of borrowing happened between 2009 and 2000, maybe default. In fact, the last one is about 13 percentage points interest payments, and it had built in a clause that half a percentage point every time you get a downgrade. Like, seriously? You know, you can see an addict going for, you know, enjoy the fellow tell you, well, every time you come back, they make charge a little more, no? You won't come back. Crazy. And when you're in junk, it means that institutional investors who have good portfolios can't invest in you. Only people who are doing speculative investing in loan sharks, technically speaking, can invest in you. You're going to pay. And that increases what I taught upstairs. The interest debt service, instead of 68 cents, it keep going up. That's why it's going up. Now you take on a lot. It costs more. So you see, in fact, there's no further go than the bottom we were. We were scraping sea ground. But then we get first upgrade was by Moody's. That's after we complete the domestic debt restructuring. Now, and having a stable macro framework in it. And then we have another one, 2 upgrades by Standard & Poor's. Now, when we say we're halfway back there, you can see halfway till we reach the investment halfway in the sea. So we expect, if we maintain the course, maintain the positive, we will break ground and come up. This is putting in context. So it really means when we mean that we are regaining. And these investors all over the world, they look at your rating because they got nothing that's really, they don't have a personal feel for your country unless you have a personal, someone go after them. So they're going, I used to hear people say ratings don't matter. Well, apparently they do. Matter very much. And you can see why. So moving on, so we've restored investors' confidence, and it will continue to do so as long as we stick to the program. This is growth. And you see all the year, the last decade where the growth was. this is our projections for growth in the latter part of from this year going forward. We have not yet, and it takes time. We have to be reasonable. The IMF team board and then could confirm. No country engages in an IMF program and get growth in the first year. In fact, no country engages in an IMF program or with a program support by IMF support and have flat in the first year. That's why it's called austerity. You don't go to the doctor and your bed half dead and get around the next day. It's time to walk, time to recover. This year we're looking, the governor will tell you flat. Flat is good. You understand? Because flat is not negative. And we could have had negative had we not been easing the burden, pumping money in the economy, and doing what we can do in terms of efficiency gains to engage the private sector. But when people say that it's absent growth, it's unreasonable. What we have to focus now on is having stop the bleeding, stabilize the economy, is now to get the growth going forward. You understand what I'm saying? Now you got to tell your patient, get off your bed and hold the rails and start to grow again, walk again, learn. And this is why we are projecting it there like that. So I am not sugarcoating it. There is no magic pill. I have said before, you don't fall in 40-foot hole and go on scale and play you. That is only in science fiction movies. You hurt up. Okay? But it's good news. All the issues that got you there have been stabilized and adjusted. The dollar being protected. The debt has been restored to stable levels. The reserves are there, so you ain't got to panic. Now we're working on, and I don't put a lot here because we don't have enough time. You're doing business anywhere. They're starting on a program to digitalize the public sector, and that's well on the way. What that does, it means that it's more efficient for people to pay taxes to do business with government. We're at the port, you see the change out from ASCODA world, where we're probably the only country in the world using this old air system to ASCO++, to ASCODA world. And of course there'll be teeth and problems going over, but it's happening, we're clearing the backlogs, it's work. Eventually you'll see a Barbados where the private sector, you guys are enabled, so you can do your business without hindrance on any side. These are things that transforming, that's being done and actively being tackled. And when the real opening batsmen come to deliver, address on this topic. I should say a bit here, and I'm doing it in simple, trying to marry growth. Some of the things we need to do growth. Why are we focusing now so much? And I have the Honorable Marsha Cattle here, who it falls on her portfolio quite a bit in terms of the doing business stuff. Why are we worrying on these things? Why? This is growth decomposition work done by the IMF team. I extended a bit for Barbados, doing it over time. What has been the drag on growth is what we will, you see the red, those declines? That is consistently year after year decline in what we call economics term total factor productivity. Really a decline in the productivity of your labor and any of the investment. Well, the blue is the investment, that's been declining anyhow. But even with a little bit of that, it's becoming less and less productive. Now, taking out the economics word and theory, what it really means, it means that your environment for business are deteriorating year after year after year. And we can decompose it even better. Let me show another chart. This was done by the IMF team, not Bert team, but another team, on the region. I just want you to focus, because we are different, everybody thinks it's one Caribbean, but we still got some heterogeneity. So focus on Barbados. You'll see the Barbados bar here. What they have predicted, this was done early, back in sometime 2018. These are gains from reforms. You see the red, sorry, where is that? This gray one is Barbados. That was much that we can gain over in medium term if we have fixed debt or debt problems. Almost a percentage point of GDP growth over the medium term because now you have more to invest. We did what? We fixed that. The other big component for Barbados was ease of doing business. If we can fix the ease of doing business problem, we are able to engage the private sector, and the private sector can start to invest and get it going, we will get more growth. And that's why, having fixed the fiscal, fixed the debt, now we are focusing on transforming, showing efficiency and effectiveness of the government. And this is not, I mean, not every country is saying it. I mean, just to point out, Jamaica has had a program for a while, and they have been quite successful, but because of the crime, where's Jamaica? Jam. Here, you can see. Whereas for us, not yet, but crime is not yet a drive for us, but that's why we need to tackle it so that you can see what is so. But for us, that's why we are focusing on now. We have to turn our attention to transforming, into doing what we are doing with the resource we have much better, much faster, much more effective, so you can compete on the international stage like other Singaporeans, other countries are competing. Do we have more slides? That one's not absolutely necessary. I should just point out, I just put a slide here in terms, it's difficult to have a crystal ball. And we're going to get, I can tell you based on what we're doing, that I am confident we get growth this year. If we continue to do what we're doing, we continue to stay the course, we continue to do the transformation, private sector continue to and begin investing and doing things. But what history has told us, these are all countries, these are growth rates between 2013 and 27, 5-year growth rate, right? You will see Grenada and Guyana and those guys are there in 5 percentage point. And this was the period in which all of them implement some sort of economic transformation and adjustment program under the IMF thing. So if history is any guide, you see, when last we had 3.4 growth? Like seriously? You know, we wake up one morning and got 3% growth in Barbados. We won't recognize ourselves. And that's what we have to look forward to about those in the region who have done it. And while they're doing it, look what Barbados was averaging for those 5 years. And that's being generous in numbers. This is what we have to look forward to if we stick to it. And then the question is, how do we get there? We continue to work on transforming the SOEs. Continue to work on improving efficiency in government and strengthening the institution of government. So that it doesn't matter what or which government is in place, institutions and the processes are strengthened. Continue to build capacity in the public sector. Because believe it or not, all this what we've suffered, we have few, literally, there's a hemorrhaging of public sector workers over that period where people, 10 years of non-productive and economic recession causes you to do that. You have to build back capacity at the Revenue Authority, at wherever, continue to do that. And then continue, as the private sector side, your role is to invest. I would say, this is the best opportunity to invest. You know about the stock markets, you know when they had the slump, the financial crisis, and the rich and people who have the money got in and bought houses early. Now we on the up. This is the time to invest. This is the time to get in and buy up. This is the time to build, expand, think business-wise. And that's how we're going to grow this economy. Having laid the wicket, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenidge. And now we will ask Prime Minister Motley to join us on stage. Thank you. Yes. Okay, well, we've had quite an overview. And I suppose we should begin with questions that would relate to the private sector. I mean, we've heard a lot of the discussion about shifting the emphasis from the government to the private sector. And there are many people also in Barbados who recognize the Herculean task that has faced the country as a whole. But perhaps they were anticipating more of an ease by now. Instead, the presentation we have had says we have to continue to stay on course. And one significant question which many people are posing is this: how much more in 2020? Just a few days ago, we had Minister Strawn in the studio, and he spoke about a number of fees that, archaic fees that now have to be adjusted, and overall, there is that concern about impact. How much more can we expect in terms of taxation before we can actually start to see light at the end of the tunnel? Prime Minister Motley?
Thank you, David. First of all, let me thank the Chamber for facilitating this discussion. I was invited to speak. I realized that every time I came here, I didn't eat because I had to speak immediately after. So I put Kevin to speak so I could have some lunch today. I didn't know that I would end up with a post-nasal drip and chest infection, but excuse the voice, and we'll go forward. And Kevin, thank you for a wonderful presentation and for making it for making it real for people. I think that the EU ambassador did some translation for our IMF visitor. David, you asked how much longer. I have been in public life for 30 years, and the one thing that I've tried to do is to maintain a free, fair, and frank discussion with the people with whom I work. When we became the government, and when we went to the IMF, we were unaware until probably about September, just before the IMF approved the program that we had settled, that the previous government had committed to the convergence of the international business sector with the domestic corporate sector. It is, if I was to use Kevin's approach in dialect, it was a big kick in the belly. We did not anticipate that we would have to make the adjustment. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school if I say that I asked the same EU ambassador one night to come and see me at 8 o'clock at government headquarters for us to begin to see how we can maneuver and manipulate what really was a high gale force wind at a time when we thought we had locked down the house. I can talk about it with a little ease now because I think that we have done the right thing. We had to be courageous and we had to make decisions with, if we have to converge, where will our corporation taxes be in 10 years? Will we be able to quadruple the take from the domestic corporate sector, or will we be able to quadruple the take from the international business with whom the country was doing? I start at this point because it became a defining moment for the government, both in terms of whether we were prepared to settle or whether we were prepared to be courageous and be bold. It has meant, however, that we have to look at other aspects of our revenue collection because our corporation taxes are 40 million less than what they were at the end of December. Now, with that, we're still on target because we made decisions to be able to increase our taxes on land, assets, and we made some adjustments to one or two other things in last year's budget. I believe that we are pretty much steady. Some of the fees that we're going to have to deal with, as Ryan said, are fees that have not been touched for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And it therefore means the delivery of the service is hampered. If we try to bring the provision of those services back onto the central government, then this country will face the continued erosion. And we're not going to do that at any cost. I gave the country a commitment that our responsibility is not only to stabilize, but to transform. And we have to live in the real world. Part of the difficulty is that Barbados became accustomed to no one wanting to confront the issue of increasing a fee, even if it was by $2 or $1 or whatever it is. And we didn't increase fees in almost everything for 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. Bus fares weren't increased for how long? Over 15, 20 years. So that I am not going to give any assurance to anyone that there will be no taxes or no increases. What I will say is that whatever increase there is will be justified on the basis of prudence, stability. We are sensitive to the fact that we want to increase disposable income in this country because governments don't trade, governments don't grow on their own. Individuals do, companies do. And if we tax them out of existence, nobody will grow. So I can give you the assurance that the government is sensitive to the condition of households and companies and will ensure that whatever decisions we take with respect to revenue adjustment will not in any way topple the apple cart for individuals or
That's the taxes.
companies. Taxes
What
and
about-
fees.
What about layoffs?
Once again, too, I'm not going to encourage anybody in Barbados or the world to believe that we can insulate everybody at all times for all reasons. We don't live, last time I checked, I got chest infection today, which means that I have no capacity to be divine. And the only body who can give you that assurance is the divine. And we need to change the conversation, and we need to recognize that, look, I've set this government two missions. One, that we needed to save the value of our dollar, and I think that you will all agree from having seen the slides that we have virtually achieved that. It is only us now who can threaten it. Two, that Barbados must become world class. What's the bad news? It doesn't happen overnight. And we didn't lose our footing overnight. What you saw there, and that slide, I wish Kevin could put it back to the slide with the total factor productivity, because that slide represents the essence of the challenge. And if I wanted to speak Bajan, I think all of us would know too that that's where the problem is. And that we know that consistently, each of us from wherever we are can up our game and do better. Whether it is in terms of workers, whether it's in terms of managers, whether it's leaders, whether it is the private sector having received a considerable amount of money being slow to want to invest, whether it is government being slow to change the systems that will facilitate. And one of the reasons that I walked with this iPad is because the doing business summary, and every month we meet, and Tricia can look at it, and every month we have taken the World Bank doing business report, and we are literally working through all of the recommendations and all of the systems one by one by one by one. We know the ones that are a little more difficult. We know where we're seeing progress with the digitization. The AG is happy because the certificates of character will soon be on a digital platform. We've started some of the digital payments where people can pay the land tax and other things online. We need to move to the next system, next stage, that will allow us to remove checks from our landscape. I am in the middle of the preparation of estimates. I am hoping that I will be able to keep in a $5 million, $4 to $5 million for the new electronic ID card. I won't know until this weekend because I'm not going to do anything to compromise the stability of this country. But it is a highly desirable initiative because it will allow Barbadians to use either their smartphone or an electronic ID. And particularly after the last government had done some of the work, but the cards that they had were left in a warehouse for 4 or 5 years and became, what's the word I'm looking for? Obsolete. So, but if we get that and we can get our pensioners then the ability to be able to move in a cashless environment and load the pensions on and do all of those things, we move into the next level. So we anticipate that during the course of this year, and I said so in the budget last March, that the next 18 to 24 months from then would allow us to go there. What I will say to you is that in becoming world class, it's not an overnight exercise, and it's going to require everybody to play their part. Now, when you look at that slide, you will see that the productivity has been lacking for decades. And those are the real conversations this country needs to have, all of us. And let's put it back to a family. None of us are going to have children in the household or an aunt or uncle in the household and let them play the fool, let them disrespect the household, let them not give of their best. My father used to tell me all the time when I first came back, I'd be coming home from university and one fete all night. He'd wake up in the morning and tell this in a hotel. Get up and carry the load, you know. And from children, first time we went into a different house, we had 2 gardeners there. We had to wake up every Saturday morning and help pick stones from 2 acres of ground. So I'm saying to you that irrespective of where we are in this country, every one of us can up our game. And becoming world class simply means upping our game.
Well, we're going to take questions from the floor. Indicate that you're ready to speak by a show of hands. I will call you.
Well, you and I tried to warm the wicket for them.
And in the meantime, Trisha Tannis, quite a lot has been said, both by Dr. Greenidge and by Prime Minister Motley. Is there any reaction that you have to the comments?
Sure, thank you. We do recognize that the government is making, some traction, and particularly with the ease of doing business, which is the critical turning point that we are at now, if we really want to set the path and the incubation environment for the kind of growth that we want to see. The challenge that we have therefore then is the speed. The Prime Minister then would have spoken to setting our expectations at a realistic pace. But then having said that, then the other challenge then would be transparency as to what is being discussed and the milestones that we're going for. And this is something that I would have mentioned to her in previous forum. We can all hold the course if we know how long the course is and what the milestones are along the course. And I think that if we had more visibility into how that process was progressing and what we're tackling with, dealing with, and what are our milestones, and they know they will slip, but we just need some general idea as to what is being worked on and in what time frame.
I really don't know how much more transparent this government can be. And I say so with all sincerity. I'm watching Ed and I'm watching you, and we've had more social partnership meetings, and we've put more on the table as to what we're doing every month before the social partnership than any other government in this country in the last 30 years. We have all of the major decisions are discussed in the social partnership. We have a birth monitoring committee that is made up of the non-governmental members of the social partnership. And I think that what, Tricia, in all frankness, you may be referring to is a natural desire that when you're running a race, there's a point in the race when you start to get tired. It's not a sprint. And there's a point when you start to get tired and say, oh Lord, how much longer? And that's where the country is. And I have the unenviable task of using 2 phrases all the time, to the point where people will strips maybe. Stay the course. Stay focused. How often have I said, Ed smiling, how often have I said, stay the course and stay focused? Because we knew that it could not be resolved overnight. The reason why we were able to move as quickly as we have is that as an opposition, for 18 months, literally every week, we worked to be able to put us in a position that we could transition this economy to a stable environment within 18 months. We've done that. The hard part of it is that I need you, everybody, you in here now to help lift some weight and to do the investments. That is why we took a conscious decision. You heard Kevin say that with the arrears, we weren't supposed to bring them down as quickly as we have, but we felt that we needed to put money back into people's pockets. And that is why what we're doing, as long as we can meet the targets set by the IMF for the net domestic assets and all the fanciful language that we have, that we are literally trying to pay down and pay off as quickly as we can without disturbing the creation of money, without disturbing the international reserves, without disturbing the other indices that are required for balance. So, but if there are specific areas that we aren't faltering on, tell us. And the one thing that I have said to my cabinet is that there is no ego, and there can be no ego in this going down. And I really, maybe I should do it now, I really want to big up my cabinet today, because this country can sometimes be a very harsh judge, and we are a culture that like big man or big woman politics, Errol Barrow, all roads led to this, etc. And the truth is that my cabinet has had a hand that no previous cabinet has ever had to deal with in this country since the introduction of cabinet government under the Bush experiment in 1955, it was, 54, 55. And they've had a hand that they had to do. They don't have the flexibility of spending to meet the needs of their stakeholders or constituents that other cabinet ministers could have done. But what they have been is responsive. And every time there's an issue, whether it is the shooting out front of St. Albans School, you saw Santia there in tutus dealing with the people, whether it is the AG ensuring that the police and the BDF and others are responding in a, and you will notice that in almost every instance the police are charging people for the crimes that have happened almost within days, which is highly, highly reflective of their capacity to deal with and respond. Whether it is Sandra Husbands, I was in Georgetown dealing with the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce. Trish and I discussed that we've agreed, I've offered them that we will accommodate them to have a room, and Trish has agreed that she will accommodate them for me. If not, the government would have had to pay for it for the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, because we need to have them having a presence here, and we are going to work with your Chamber of Commerce and Private Sector Association to help you have a presence in Georgetown, because the two countries have been tied at the umbilical cord since the 19th century. Or whether it is Marsha and Ryan, who are literally helping me carry the weight in this ministry, because you can't do all that I'm doing without others there. Or Kirk, who is trying to break new ground and he's going to have some difficult discussions soon, because in addition, Barbados cannot have a marine culture or a beach culture that is unregulated. And we're going to have to bring order and regulation to what's happening on our beaches and what's happening in our sea with respect to it. And I know you're getting anxious, but I also want to be able to say, or Colin, or indeed Peter and William, every aspect of our infrastructure. You know, I wake up on a morning sometimes and say, all right, what's going to happen today now? True. Because you cannot fail to invest. You have not invested a cent in roads, in infrastructure, in equipment, in the hospital, in the schools, in all of those things for 10, 12 years. And you know it from your own house, that when you think that something working good, and next week when you plan for it to work, boom, it gone. So that is part of the difficulty, and I really think that I have a cabinet who has been working flat out, trying to respond to needs. Are we perfect? We are not. But are we doing the job of our lives to be able to bring this country not just to stability, but to ask us to hold a line and to stay the course? Because if you want a tree to grow, the seed is not going to jump up like this overnight. It's going to take us, and we say conservatively, 7 years in order to be able for people to say, Barbados is that country in the world that is respected for speaking its mind and acting in accordance with its values. Barbados is that country in the world where it has not catered to the 1 or 2%, but it has catered to the majority of people, so that people like Kevin Greenidge can get up here and have the confidence to talk in Beijing while having been a master's student at Cambridge University or a doctorate student at University of Nottingham. Or that David Ellis can have attended a newer secondary school and is now among the top journalists in the entire Caribbean. That's the kind of thing. that's the kind of thing, and that's why when was asked, should we build a memorial to Errol Barrow in a building, we can help Peter Phillips do it. But he got to go out there and help people mobilize and raise it too. But what is more important is to give opportunities to people who went to schools built after 1951 to be able to do the things that they want to do. And in the case of Mr. Barrow, we've said it be in culinary arts, aviation, or maritime, and when we announce the others, and for Mr. Adams, those are the kinds of living experiments. Biggest problem in government, we need people.
I need to get a question in.
And leadership and management.
Thank
And the private sector knows that, and we need some people from the private sector to be prepared to say, I'm prepared to give government or public service 2 years or 3 years. This country will not change that slide unless people are prepared to step out of their familiar and come into the public space, Lisa and others, and give us 2-3 years.
Questions from the floor. Yes, sir. Please identify yourselves.
Hello, my name is Art Edwards, and I am a portrait sculptor. And I am a productive member of the Barbados community, has been for about 10-15 years. My stuff sells all over the world. And I would like to ask you, ma'am, to buy from me. Support me as a productive Barbadian. I mean, the consultants getting a lot of money. They're getting paid all the time. Consultants only employ one person. I employ a
You brought
number.
some stuff here today?
No. We can talk in private if it's necessary. We can do that. Not a problem.
No problem.
That's the first thing. And my second request of you is that you cannot have productive people without sales support. You do not employ sellers. Anywhere in your overseas agencies, there's not one person I could look at that. My good friend, the ambassador in Miami, who used to work in an insurance company, who actually engaged in the concept of selling. If you can't sell, there's no point in having a product. All you do is produce for a warehouse. I've been trying to tell that to David Thompson and Francis Stewart and the one before him and stuff. It has to happen that someday you recognize that there's a need for a sales force, an international standard group of people who can sell anybody. I have to nod and say, my man, I buy whatever you got. Because unless you do that, productive people like me can get nowhere.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Have I made a point here, ma'am?
No, and you're making a very valid point.
Thank you.
And let me add to it. I told you that the corporation tax moment was a defining moment because we made a determination that we had to go for international business as our domestic business. The only way that's going to happen, Art, is by us doing exactly what you said. And that is why we are opening up missions and trying to find the people. You hear me say, I need people.
This is on record, ma'am.
Huh?
I'm recording this.
No problem. So are the people there, but the difference with me
The
difference with me is that I don't say nothing I don't want to say.
Okay. I am likewise inclined, ma'am. I'm likewise inclined. Thank you.
But I want to thank you because I know that you two are one of the advocates every day on the calling program.
But no. That fella gets me in trouble all the time. You have a similar voice. That's all.
But I want to say that I want you and in this room, and we now have the draft document before us. In this room in November 2017, we said we're going to break new ground by creating a piece of legislation that will allow every person, primarily Barbadians, but anybody in the world for that matter, to be a promoter of Barbados and to be able to benefit from being a promoter. And we are now putting the systems in place that will not compromise the public purpose and will not constitute a public mischief. What do I mean? If you have a project and can bring to the country a project that will add value, we need a program, a committee of government officials and social partnership officials that will assess it and determine whether it is an approved program. If it is an approved program and it actually starts to deliver benefits to the country on the indices that we've agreed to, then you should be able to get a payment from us after and once the thing starts to achieve. And then we report and lay in Parliament that David Ellis brought a project to us that led to X hundred jobs, Y foreign exchange, and that we are in a position then to move forward and pay you Z amount, and the country knows. It cannot be corruption. Every bank in here is charging a ranger's fee. What other fees they charge? There's about 2 or 3 other fees that they charge for every major transaction. And all I'm doing is trying, as Art has said, to be able to leverage every person who walks and has an interest in building this country into a program that allows them to be compensated rather than leaving it to people who are close to government, either public servants or politicians.
There's a question here on my right.
Good morning, or good afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. As you know, we've developed a green bond to allow the average Barbadian to invest in alternative energy. My question is, most of the savings in Barbados is in Barbados dollars. So if people invest in Barbados dollars, you need US dollars to buy the equipment to generate the energy. How will we deal with that? Will there be sufficient foreign exchange? Because I'm a very strong believer that the alternative energy industry should be owned by Barbadians rather than by external people coming in. Can the government negotiate with to borrow funds in US dollars to support the buy-in of the equipment that's required, and on lend the local people to invest in the industry? We are very much interested in expanding rapidly. Prime Minister, believe me, we are very keen on doing what you are looking to do, and Mr. Greenidge, to expand and grow the economy, for sure. But we're still taking too long to get permissions and licenses. We got about 4 things to do before you can get you can start a system going on it. It's taken a long time,
You're
and
talking
it's very
about
frustrating.
renewable energy system?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking? Which system, Busy?
Systems to put in photovoltaics. We have lots of area that we want to do it.
And believe you me, we are on the same wavelength. But this country is still a country governed by the rule of law.
Oh, there.
And the bottom line is, no, it is. But Busy, you also would be fair to me and you if you told the room that your company and the SSA have been in discussions and have put a proposal before the government in order to have a green energy park, and that is in satisfaction of the fact that we have negotiated down SBRC's payments from 22 or 23 million down to 13 million, correct? And that,
yes, ma'am, that is true.
And that,
that's why I had to sell the
and that the length of time that we
driving
the length of time that we took to negotiate it delayed us from being able to get the proposals from you for the green energy park. I now have those proposals, and that we are now going to review them in good faith and in good order. But we also have over our head a claim from Cahill, it is now, or Quantum, whichever one it is, Cahill, that we are also still trying to manage and balance back out, so that we are going to get there. In respect of some of the other delays, we had to take a policy decision to inform the FTC that all of what it does is not regulatory, but some of it is policy. And Minister Sutherland has done an excellent job in helping us, therefore, in the last 3 months, try to get to the point where the feed-in tariff would not only be for 1 megawatt and under, but all for 5 megawatts and under. And then we took a decision in November, late November, early December, that anything over 5 megawatts would first and foremost be the subject of negotiations with Light and Power, recognizing that the feed-in tariff is the ceiling, and that you would have to come under that once you were dealing with more than 5 megawatts. So I think that you will find that the times will improve. We made the intervention at the end of November, early December. I know that the Barbados Light and Power, particularly after their embarrassing moment, has understood in no uncertain terms that they themselves cannot be other than absolutely diligent in respect of time to ensure that the country is not exposed to any kind of untoward circumstances again. And for that to happen, it's not only going to be therefore fossil fuel driven electricity, generated electricity, but the renewable energy. So I think you'll be comfortable with that.
Prime Minister, I would like to thank publicly the ministers that are responsible for energy and water.
There's only one
Because
man.
they're doing,
There's only one man.
no, there's
Energy, Minister of
Minister
Energy
Carroll
and
has
Water.
been doing a great job.
Well, she's economic affairs, but she's in
Well,
energy
whatever
and
she's
water.
in, but I don't know all these ministries like you know, but I'll tell you this, progress is being made, for sure. Really progress is being made, because it's taking now about a third of the time that it used to take. So we're moving towards the thing. I just know that you are always in a hurry, and
That's true.
stood up and wanted to
I know how much time the Lord
encourage
gives.
you to help out a little bit. But we wish to thank you for all the work that you're doing. I know you're non-stop going. I don't know how you manage it, but the point is that I got up to say that we want to expand, we want to grow the economy, and we're working towards it.
The green
as quickly
energy,
as we
the
can.
green energy part will come.
Thank you.
As to your first question on the US dollar capacity, the truth is that we may have to look at issuing not us issuing, but facilitating others issuing US dollar bonds as well, and not just Barbados dollar bonds. One of the things that we were looking at is a novel idea, as I said. Work is still being done on it, that if you issue a US dollar bond in order to be able to raise the money, that you redeem it not with the payment of persons in interest, but with the redemption being the reduction in your electricity bill, and therefore the benefit of the bond is attached to the house as opposed to the individual. So when the house is sold, the house will carry the value of the benefit of the income stream from the bond. So that's a very novel idea globally, and we're not yet at the point where we've completely refined it. I hope within another 2 to 3 months we can, but once that happens, that will also increase some of it. Having said that, there's a lot of domestic liquidity. I want to speak to the banks directly, because the banks have also to be prepared to have an appetite for the things that matter in this country, like tourism. The ability for them to lend more aggressively to the tourism sector is absolutely necessary. And the ability for us, I know they have an appetite for the renewable energy market, because that's seen as a clear one. But there are a number of other areas in agriculture. 2 Saturdays ago, we went through the economics of string beans. Because when I was a child, we didn't eat broccoli. We had string beans. You can't see string beans across Barbados now. And Cynthia Ford will tell you that the amount of land she has in St. Thomas and elsewhere, and all over this island, that the government is going to be actively promoting the engagement for food security by ordinary members, and using the Agricultural Development Fund that you'll hear more about to be able to ask people to come on board to help us expand production on a number of key areas of food and vegetables, because there's no reason, if you can plant string beans that will grow in 6 weeks, and you will spend no more than $4,000 to $5,000 on an acre to tend to those string beans in that 6 to 8 weeks, but you can, string beans selling at $11 a kilogram, and the yield per acre is 2,200 kilograms per acre. Do the maths. So you're going to walk away after 6 to 8 weeks with about $15,000 at least. Now, if people know that nobody should be hungry in this country and nobody should be without work in this country, there is more than enough food that we can produce and buy from each other. Before I came up here, I asked Kevin for the same amount of money for furniture imports. We import $28 million in furniture, but we still want to import it instead of buying. Now, the problem is we need design. And I've asked the Barbados Community College in Santia to be able to come up with a program for design so that we can have attractiveness and not compete only on price point. Now, I know that these things may seem esoteric, We took decisions with relation to uniforms. There has to be some level of import substitution to give people opportunities in this country without necessarily breaching the rules of the international trade organizations to which we are still committed.
Dr. Greenwich, in your presentation, you spoke about the loss in productivity and stuff. You also spoke about the issue of growth. But if we look at what was said by the president of the Barbados Economic Society a few days ago in response to the central bank report, he lamented the fact that it seemed as though the growth was hinged too much on just tourism, and that the diversification which is so necessary appeared to be lacking. How do you respond to that?
Thank you. Barbados at the moment is, the economy is driven by tourism. But as the Prime Minister indicated, we are diversifying other areas. That will take some time.
Yeah, just hold it. It is on, but you have to hold it closer to your mouth.
Okay. That will take some,
Don't be afraid.
I'll try not to.
One thing, he's not as afraid of man.
So we have moved, there's no get away from it. Tourism is the main engine of the Barbados economy. Has been so for a while. But what we need to do now is diversify in the other areas, renewable energy, the different parts of the international business sector, etc. That's going to take a while. I've just talked about going fossil free by 2030. The Prime Minister indicated these are areas where we diversify. There's no way getting away from it. We are tourism, mainly tourism-driven economy. But we have to do those other linkages.
Let me help you, Kevin. Yesterday afternoon, I launched what? I did the groundbreaking for a major manufacturing plant in this country. It's probably the first manufacturing plant in over a decade. And that is to manufacture ice cream and to manufacture burgers and other meat products that can be sold not just to Chevette, but to the cruise ships and to others, and will have the international certification to be able to allow us to export. Excuse me. The government has passed legislation for medicinal cannabis because we expect that industry to grow. We just spoke about the target for food security and the import substitution for uniforms. Government spends millions of dollars in uniforms. The cabinet has taken a decision that that work has to come from Barbadians in order to be able to propel growth. And whether it is for the police, the security guards, the whoever, that we need to do that in Barbados. We also just spoke about renewable energy, so that to believe that the government is not factoring in things and initiatives that relate to growth that is not tourism driven, and I haven't even gotten to international business, because we don't want to call it international business anymore, because it's our business. And Barbados is a global business domicile. Kay is working on allowing us to not only be attractive in terms of taxation, the commercial court that the AG is establishing now, and the quality of life issues, but the cybersecurity issues has to become part and parcel of the brand to be able to attract global businesses to establish themselves here. And that is one of the reasons why we feel as well that we can have businesses anchoring and moving from Barbados, but providing services and goods in Suriname and Guyana with Barbados as its corporate headquarters. That is a multifaceted approach that goes beyond tourism. Having said that, we will not apologize for the fact that the government has a major set of proposals before us for hotels and for villas and for other things, and we're working through them. I leave you this afternoon to go and meet with the Blue Horizon people. I've dealt with the Hyatt, and that will be effectively before us, other than the overwater issues which they have to come back on. Royalton is building in Whole Town from May. The Hotel Indigo, which is the old Caribbean Hotel, which had its town meeting, I think, 2-3 weeks ago, should be starting within 3 or 4 months as well. So there will be a lot of tourism. We expect within 2 years, Sam Lords has restarted. And I expect within 2 years, a minimum of 1,500 additional rooms. But it is, and that's being conservative, because I'm not adding in beaches or paradise or a number of the others that are still at the stage where no specific start date has been given.
Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, there's a question here on my left.
Good afternoon. My name is Anita. I'm in the tourism industry. I must say that some things Prime Minister said concerning agriculture, I am very excited about it. Us planting and getting back into that, I am very, very excited. And to say also, it's good to see that wherever you are, I'm always seeing a lot of your ministers with you. I really applaud them, and I think they're doing a wonderful job showing their support. A few issues that keeps coming up to me all the time is the roads. And one of the things, I remember plastic bags sewing, that's been years ago, and we're still having issues. But I was wondering if there's any possibility of us having like community forums, just like how we have adopt a sign. If we can actually have communities and businesses adopt a roads or roads in an area, and the community means the people and the businesses in the areas are responsible for keeping that road without potholes, because it's one of the things that I find I have to be ducking, especially when I'm driving tourists around, and I find it very, very, very scary because I have to. So that's just one of my problems and solutions.
I thank you for the idea. In fact, what I'll do is go even further. We've been having conversations with one or two people, and we recognize that in some instances I may be able, more so on the West Coast, to be able to put planning gains in place that may allow a contribution towards the rehabilitation of a particular section of the road. But the truth is that the roads are very bad. Nothing has been done for 10, 12 years. What we've done, as you remember in that first budget, I put $10 million in the estimates to buy equipment for MTW, because MTW was paying 500-600 men to come to work every day and not an ounce of equipment available to the men, so there was no work to do, no things. Luckily, we've now started that back. We also are looking to ramp up. We are going to be starting Highway 1 from the bottom of University Hill to Old Town Methodist Church very shortly, and we'll pause there because it makes no sense doing from Old Town Methodist Church to Trent's because of the work that's going to be done by Royalton on that part. But what we've said is that all the heavy-duty trucks must come down Greenwich rather than giving people free access through every road and mashing up every road. We're also starting Highway 7. I'm waiting for MTW Peter to tell me whether it is going to be from the Garrison to Rendezvous or whether it will be from Rendezvous to Maxwell. But I suspect it's going to be the first one that they'll start with, and that's going to take time because, as you know, in every instance, when we're doing Highway 1, for example, we're going to have to do a lot of work at night, and we're going to have, there's no access road, Sandra would tell you, between the bottom of University Hill and the bottom of Holders Hill. So, and we're putting in and replacing the water mains one time, all of the mains one time. So that's why it has taken as long as it is to start, because it's not just a case of digging the road and paving it back. Okay, but the idea that we can have, particularly on tenantry roads or subsidiary roads, you're talking to the right crowd. I knew you were really talking to the rest of the people in here by asking for the Adopt a Road, and I thank you so much for it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more. Yes, Patrick Hoyas. No, just wait for the mic, please.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Greenidge. It was excellent. And Ms. Motley, you were very good yesterday and also today. Thank you. Apart from needing growth, as you were saying, to move forward, there's a specific issue now that we have to start paying debt service, which is like an added. We would need the growth anyway, but now we're going to start paying debt service. Can you say how much that would be roughly? Because I get lost in the numbers. And And on that score, Ms. Motley, can you say anything specific about beaches, Four Seasons, Hyatt, Sam Lords, and any other thing that was starting every year for the last 3 years?
Well, I can't be responsible for the first 18 months of that 3 years, but I'll be responsible for this one. With respect to Four Seasons, it's not Four Seasons, let's call it Paradise. We have signed a MOU, as I said, at the end of October with the Morse family, who are the ones who are involved in Port Ferdinand. And basically, the Attorney General and Professor Prasad have been meeting with their lawyers in order to be able to conclude the agreement. They made an initial payment into escrow of $1 million US, and once we finish, we anticipate hopefully that we would have an agreement that would see what 20 million US paid to the government now, and the other 44.5 million US being kept as preference shares, and the government then will either offer them to members of the public at the appropriate time or hold them. That's for a future government to decide. With respect to Sam Lord's Castle, the work has restarted, and I've been very grateful and expressed gratitude to the Chinese government. We explained to them that we did not and could not find the counterpart funds, and in any event, we are going to sell. And the Chinese, the construction company, they've gifted the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. the counterpart funds for that, and that project has actually restarted. The request for proposals for the sale of it closed on the 31st of January, that's last week, and I'm waiting for BTII to do the analysis and to let us know what the interest has been for the purchase of Sam Lords. With respect to beaches, once again, the Attorney General and I would have met with Mr. Stewart up to late last year. They say that they're anxious to start. We'll see when they start. They have put in also, and they asked us to note that they've expanded by an additional 66 rooms, and that town planning permission for those 66 rooms has come in for where they are in Maxwell. So I suspect that they're going to do that, and we are waiting word from Mr. Stewart as to what he will do with beaches. And I'll say no more on that at this stage. With respect to Port Ferdinand, that is before the town planning now, and in fact the MTW has already agreed in principle to a realignment that we have to do there, but that would see an extra 60 or 70 rooms going to Port Ferdinand, and a new 5 or 6 class branded hotel, 6-star, branded hotel will be opening there. These are the definitive ones. We have the outline permission application in for the Pierhead, and in fact, when I was in Trinidad on the weekend, I met the person who has been doing the geotechnical and soil studies, because I never even knew that we had peat in parts of the ground next to the Constitution River. And they're doing those in order to be able to get the design of the buildings right, with a hope that they can start by end of this year, early 2021. So these are the ones that are in town planning. These are not speculative. There are other speculative ones. There are many more with whom we've had discussions. I'm not going to excite or titillate people. My ministerial colleagues will tell you that I believe in reporting progress rather than making promises. And that's the continued approach of the government.
Patrick and my other journalistic colleagues would want to know how much money you are talking about with the counterpart funding at Sam Lords.
At Sam Lords, it would have been about 20 million US, it was, Kevin? About 20 million US. But the bottom line is that the reason why we've advertised, and we don't expect the sale to be immediate, but let me give you the government's thought process. Anybody who wants to buy Sam Lords may want to have an input in the design, and therefore we felt that we should do the request for proposals now, so that if they need to make any adjustments to the design, that they can do so at this stage. But we will continue to complete the project as a government with a completion of the sale at the end of the construction. And why? The 2% money which the Chinese government has graciously put before us is unlikely to be beaten by any other source. And therefore, let's finish the project and then let's hand over a finished project as a sale.
Quick follow-up. By Port Ferdinand, you meant Hyatt, right?
No, sorry, Hyatt is Bridgetown.
Bridgetown.
I told you that the Hyatt is right here before me. The only thing I'm not looking at this stage, and I've said we need the additional information on the over-the-water bungalows,
Right.
but I must tell you that I'm kindly disposed to it in principle. Why? Anybody can tell me when the one at Radisson was built? I know it's been there over 70 years.
Oh.
And perhaps I want to use this opportunity to contextualize this. We grew up knowing Bridgetown as a commercial district for merchants and with limited residential accommodation. I am satisfied beyond a shadow of a doubt now that the Lord has blessed us with the most magnificent of beaches in Carlisle Bay to be found anywhere in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. The planners have all said to us, local and international planners, have said that we have a unique opportunity to have a crescent-shaped bay with a UNESCO World Heritage Site also attached to it. I am satisfied that Bridgetown is going to be more known as a tourism site and mixed use for residential for Bajans living back in town at all income levels, low income, middle income, upper middle income. And government is doing its part. We're going to put out the RFP for the repurposing of the Treasury building shortly, as I announced, for young people, because when young people live in a city, life stays in the city. We are going to see the application for the Pierhead is not just about tourism accommodation, but it's also about residential accommodation. And in the Hyatt, the same thing. With the Hyatt, what remains now to be done, I think the Attorney General has been negotiating with both the developers and with respect to the compensation for Mrs. Ram's property, the government will pay. That's never been in doubt. But there is a dispute. You cannot object to a land tax valuation of $4 million every year for 15 years or 10 years, however much the objections were, and then make a claim for $32 million for the site. Now, if the money was mine, they might stand a chance. But I am not defending or spending my money. I'm spending the taxpayers' money. And I'm going to make the same point for Harry Smith, because the valuation of land tax for Harry Smith is negligible too. But I've seen letters going around in the last 24 to 48 hours in circumstances where we've said to the people, we'll meet with you in good faith. But I'm doing estimates. And the bottom line is that for the last 2 weeks, that's what has consumed us. But more importantly, you can't come and claim $24 million with a land tax bill of $3 or $4 million. I'm not going to subject the government and taxpayers of this country to that kind of behavior. Now, the mechanism at law allows us to take possession and for the amounts to be settled. So we're not acting in any way that is unconstitutional or that is in breach of the law. But I do pray that we can have a sensible, reasonable resolution and that we can give people the money, because in giving them the money, they will invest it and do other things as soon as possible. Now, what is the bottom line? The last government approved a Hyatt that was on the DECO site and the Old Harbor Police site. We said no. That is too obsocky and too out of proportion. We can live with it if you take it right back to the corner of the alley. I can't remember the name of the road. You remember it?
You remember.
You know, the alley was between M.G. Tucker and Pirate School. And what they did, therefore, was that they are building on that whole footprint. And it will be 4 buildings. We've been assured, I've been very clear on this, that when I come to the junction of Bethel Church and, is that Bay Street properly? That we will have a window to the sea still there. We are going to make decisions to continue to keep windows to the sea and that there must be a provision for vendors on the MG Tucker end of the site as well. Against that background, we can live therefore with the higher. What does it mean? That instead of, I don't want to be invidious, if I was on a political platform, I would tell you what animals might be in the building, but I'm not. Instead of us having limited activity on that site right now, I want to see 2,500 workers before Christmas on that site working. And when the building's finished, I want to see 1,500 workers coming to work every day. And that's what the decision is. Very last point. It helps to have a little gray hair, or in your case, no hair.
Hidden gray hair.
Why? Just as I remember your interviews in the early 80s, you will recall too the amount of commerce that the country had with the building of the ABC highway. You will recall the amount of commerce that the country had with the building of the central bank, building towers. I have come to recognize that Barbadians, and we used to say as a child, you can't tax my town. I can say whatever I feel like. Barbadians value the ability to speak, and we must always encourage it. And that is why this government has had more town planning, town hall meetings than any other. But we must put it in context, because there will always be an objector or an objection to every form of development. What I give the country the assurance is that we will listen, and where the objections make sense from a public perspective, we will take them into account. In the case of Blue Horizon, I believe some adjustments have been made to the plans. I'm going to be able to see what we can do there. But what we cannot do is to keep this country in a position where no development is taking place because we are frightened for the fact that somebody has objected. And I want to give the country the assurance that I may not be many things, but I'm going to give you the assurance that tone and respect for the public space and respect for public purpose will always be maintained. But we must move Barbados ahead. If not, that graph and the other graphs that have kept us stagnated for the last decade will also keep us stagnated for the next decade.
Prime Minister, perhaps the last question from me. There's a question from a gentleman there, so I'll hold my last question.
Those who want more questions can come to the Ideas Forum in St. Peter this evening at 7:30 at Alexandra School.
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for the debate. Dr. Greenwich mentioned earlier that in Barbados in achieving this primary surplus of 6%, a lot of it was achieved by way of cost savings, and because we weren't able to attain growth. Now, there's something that has stayed with me. About 2 years ago, I visited a government office, and we were going through austerity. A number of persons were being sent home, and in this particular office, there were a number of old females who indicated that persons were sent home already, and next to being sent home in the union's last in, first out policy will result in one of the most productive persons in the department being sent home more than likely. I remember one lady saying that if this person is sent home, she's going to put in for early retirement because this was the most productive person in the department. Now I learned that the person was sent later on. Is there any room on the government side to negotiate with the unions or to look at the review of this policy of last in, first out? Because oftentimes the most productive persons in government departments are those who have come in last. They may not have come in necessarily last, but they are in the prime of the production. And we often talk about productivity. Productivity is at the core when we look at everything happening. If the government continues to be hamstrung by this policy of last in, first out, then the gains that we're hoping to achieve by way of unit productivity, I can see that being quite
The
a
point
challenge.
is well made. Part of the difficulty that we had is that we had to move quickly, and the government had not had a proper performance management system. You have to have a proper, transparent performance management system. If not, you're going to be subject to all kinds of allegations. So we knew that we would have to go with the union on the last in, first out for this time. We are working assiduously to put in performance evaluation, and we're working assiduously to be able to change our relationship with public servants. Public servants, for example, have had to deal with the fact, and Ms. Atkins, the Director General, is in front of me here so she can confirm. If you want to do something for your family, this public service makes you a liar. Because if your mother got to go to the hospital, you either have to take a sick day or a vacation day in order to be able to do it. That's antiquated. And I'm sorry that I think Mrs. Eswick has gone, but she, in the social partnership, and others have been working to allow us to put new rules in place that will allow us to be able to introduce a system of lieu days, up to 7 days, where you can go and exchange. We're trying to put under the National Training Initiative significant sums now into being able to retrain everybody. And I am not an HR expert, so here's how I explain it. What does excellence look like? Define it, train to it, certify to it if you can, and monitor the habit of excellence. And we're trying to do that across the board in both the public and private sector. So my brother, I hope that there will never be a next time, but realistically, if ever there is, that decisions can be made on the basis of performance, on the basis of merit, and in a transparent and fair way. But as Ms. Atkins would tell you, we need to have a comprehensive performance management system in place. The last point I'd like to make, small societies suffer from the sociology of smallness, and we get frightened to tell somebody that you're not performing up to scratch. Or if we tell them, the person believes, you face it all the time as a manager too, I'm sure, that you don't like them. But it has nothing at all. You will love alignment with the person. But you didn't do your job in the way in which you were supposed to do it. So let's wheel and come again and get it right.
My question to you is this. In the earlier answer you gave about taxes and fees, you said you couldn't give us any assurance that you wouldn't have those. But you have to come to terms with the other side of this, where people said in the election campaign, the Labour Party said you can't tax your way out of a recession. How do you reconcile those two?
That we're not. If you look at, in fact, we're not taxing our way out of this recession. This government has given the greatest level of income tax relief that any government in Barbados has given in the last 15 years. And you got the last one last month. Your paycheck last month, if you pay income taxes in this country, would have seen a further reduction in the amount of taxes that you pay. So we reduced it in July, and we reduced it again in January. And for the first time, people who earn between $25,000 a year and $35,000 a year will get back every cent that they pay in tax after April when they file, because they're going to get the compensatory income credit. So what does that effectively mean? That anybody earning $35,000 or less in Barbados is not paying income taxes in the long run. And at the same time, we've not carried up the value-added tax to offset those, the relief that we've given you. And then we've gone further. We've extended the reverse tax credit from people earning $18,000 a year to $25,000 a year, so that they too can get the $1,300 a year to offset the amount of VAT and import taxes that they would have paid in the goods that they buy in their normal life. So when you look, and I will ask Clyde and others to produce it for you, and Ryan, when you look at the incidence of taxation that the average person who earns just under $3,000 a month is paying in Barbados, you will see that they are significantly better off under this government from the last year's adjustments than they were before.
Prime Minister, if I could just add that
The slide I showed earlier showed the fiscal adjustment over the 2-year period. 5 percentage points. Remember, you had to move from minus about 7% deficit to a surplus. 5 percentage point of the adjustment of the 7 is from expenditure. Only 2 percentage points is from taxes. This is confirmed and published in the IMF staff report for the last mission. So the ratio of 5 to 2.
I think part of the problem, David, is that we've become accustomed to a few voices trying to set a narrative for us. And those voices need to spend some time dealing with the facts rather than dealing with the spin. And if they spent the time dealing with the facts, and if perhaps I need to pause a little more and deal and confront them, because my grandfather used to tell me that if you give a lie a head start, you got hell to catch up with it. And I'm glad that others in the government are speaking out, but that's part of the problem. Income taxes and corporation, let's deal with the corporation taxes. Not a fella in this room ain't complaining, because the corporation tax starts at 5.5% now, and now goes down to 1% for over $30 million. Now what does that mean? That you got a relief that the government didn't necessarily want to give you, but we've given you because we needed to sustain our business sector for the long term. But what does it also mean? That you have to carry more weight, as Ed and I have discussed, in other things like training and other aspects of fees in the society, because all of that money is not just for you to put in a bank account and look at and say how great thou art.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Motley.
If I could just respond to that last comment very, very briefly. The sheer trauma that the retail and distribution sector and the private sector has gone through in 10 and a half years translates into very, very poor profitability if it exists. Some are break even, some have had to go through significant restructuring. And I discussed it with my colleagues in ICAP, because the truth is that whilst we appreciate the reduction, significant reduction in taxation, the reality is there are several companies that will not be in a position to accept that gift for a while, simply because they have losses carried forward from this decade. And so we have to take that into account as well. They have not yet turned the corner where they're actually tax paying, and therefore they can benefit from the reduction in tax. We hope that that's a temporary situation. We are hopeful, we are confident it's a temporary situation.
It is, but I also want to touch it and thank you, because I met with the Chamber in 2013, and Ed would tell you, and I begged the Chamber to make some noise, and they didn't make it sufficient. And it led, that last 5 years, how do you think I feel when I see companies like Brankers or Black Bess or others falling through the others? But the body blows that they got were the equivalent of stage 3 cancer or stage 4 by the time we got in. So, and we are conscious that we want to handhold as many, because it is harder to let a company start from scratch and build up than to resuscitate one and allow it to get back strong. So believe you me, we in this together.
How can you help those companies now?
In some instances, we have to look at what business they're in. In some instances, it's looking at what statutory payments they have and putting payment arrangements that make more sense for them. It's no sense saying to them that you owe government millions of dollars and you got to pay next month and then they can't pay wages. But the same government just beg for debt relief. Now, similarly, the banks that gave us the debt relief, some of them are posting profits again after a year. And that was after 10 years before posted profits. They had 10 years of profits of $1.5 billion among the 5 banks in this country. And I've said to people, you can't ask us to pay you a premium for additional bad risk, for bad credit. And when you get paid for 10 years for it, not want to step up to the plate if the risk becomes reality. And that's basically what we had to do to get people to understand that you had to restructure the debt. But the underlying performance of this economy is still good. If not, the banks would not be going back into profit mode as quickly as they are. And more importantly, the confidence